Hello and welcome to another episode of Cyber Matters. I'm your host, Russ Dorsey, Principal and CIO at Kasuf & Company, and Cyber Matters is part of the Kasuf Podcast Network. Cyber Matters, we talk about the cyber that matters to us, our clients, their families, businesses. This is a personal, human look at cyber, the impact of technology, and how we're deploying it to enrich business and to enrich our lives, but also how to stay safe, how to protect those things that are important to you. Today we are very excited to welcome our guest, Joshua Crumbaugh. He's the CEO of PhishFirewall. I guess full disclosure would be appropriate first. PhishFirewall is a company we use, but also we are using them and working with them with some of our clients. But Joshua, I want to welcome you. I appreciate you taking time out of your day. Just told Joshua, in the pre-show, we're going to skip over the bio because it is very long. I'd be here for 20 minutes just reading everything you've done, but 17 jobs in 23 years, man. I mean, now, if I was interviewing you, I'd be like, what's up? But now a lot of those are concurrent. So I guess my question for you is, do you buy your Retland in bulk? I mean, how do you keep all these things up in the air that you've been doing through your career?
No, I mean, I'm just always been a very driven person. And in my career, it was often, stepping up, taking the next opportunity. And really just progressing my career and progressing often within these organizations as well. So yeah, it's been a crazy run of things. I got into ethical hacking because I was looking for a challenge. Mm-hmm. And when that challenge wasn't hard enough, I guess I opened up a company because I was really looking for a challenge.
Yeah, you'll definitely find it there. Now, your background, as far as your education, was in marketing, right? At Oral Roberts University, is that correct? But I was just thinking about the marketing and the psychology behind that has got to be an edge, because when you get into that side of things and understanding, so I'm sure that's been something has given you an edge when it comes to the hacking and the ethical hacking that you're doing, right?
It's funny. My career took an unexpected turn when I got to college. The marketing dean sort of took me under his wing, and by took me under his wing, I mean it might be more accurate if I said recruited me to marketing. I spent a good decade there, and very much heavily into studying the psychology behind how do people make decisions and how do we influence those decision-making, those decision-making processes. And so that naturally led me to being very good at the social engineering part later in my career when I got into ethical hacking. Mm-hmm. Because quite literally the day I learned that ethical hacking was a thing, I quit my job and said, this is what I'm going to do for a career.
I mean, you were I think a senior pen tester with the FDIC, was that correct? And then also with the SEC, the Security and Exchange. So I mean, you definitely jumped in with both feet and went in that direction. So to talk about PhishFirewall specifically, and again, you came, I guess, to this. Explain PeopleSec. Was that your first company?
First company, we could go a long ways back. I mean, do we count mowing lawns when I was 10? But no, I guess PeopleSec was my first cybersecurity company. And I founded that with the idea of we're going to do consulting to build this really cool technology. And so we got most of the way there, probably 80% of the way there on building that technology under PeopleSec. And then at that point, we said, okay, we really want to take this to market. We can't, we want to take this to market and we want to go at an accelerated rate. And so we decided to, instead of continue bootstrapping, to spin out PhishFirewall as its own product, go out and get investors and really shut down PeopleSec. We still do a little bit of consulting, but it's very high end, very exclusive. The primary core of our business is PhishFirewall, the product.
Okay, so what you're doing with PhishFirewall came out of the experience and the products you were developing with PeopleSec. So then that brings us to PhishFirewall, which phish testing company, but you came into this market where there's already some pretty big players. So, I mean, what did you see as the opportunity here, and what drove what you were developing as far as what is your differentiator? What's separating you from this?
Well, yes, a lot there. And so to start, the thing that sort of got me into this or sparked me to start PhishFirewall was in my consulting career. I was breaking into all of the most secure locations in the world. It was almost like a gotcha game. And I didn't see a lot of anything to actually get fixed as a result of my testing efforts. And so the worst case of this ever was this major financial institution that I was able to tailgate or into their corporate headquarters and into their executive offices 4 years in a row off of the exact same person. The problem is that there was zero education. There was nothing that came with as a result. And so my testing and my, no matter what I did, it really didn't provide any real value. Now, on occasion, some customers would want us to test for more than compliance. And those were my favorite customers because they would fix everything that we told them needed to be fixed. But the large majority weren't. And especially when it came to the human findings, because when I would talk to them about being vulnerable, they'd say, well, you can't patch stupid. And so that sort of became my the pet peeve. And out of that pet peeve, I developed a passion. I looked at the industry and all of the tools that were in it, like, things like KnowBe4 or Proofpoint or Cofense, to name a few. And I looked at those tools and it almost, I guess it became my passion that, we hand out these tools with no training, no guidance on how to build an effective or proper system. And often the tools, the very features of the tools are counterproductive if we're trying to keep a positive and non-punitive approach in our methodology. And so, I set out to create something better, something that was friendly to the users, something that the users would actually enjoy, something that would engage the users and actually help them learn these topics instead of just parroting something during a test that they take once a year to prove that they could remember it for 10 seconds. We don't need them to remember it for 10 seconds. We need them to remember it all year long. And so that's PhishFirewall is sort of the culmination of that. And at our core, it's there's two things that make us different. A, we're not a tool. We are a completely AI-driven solution that has psychology at its core. And so those best practices are built into everything that we do, and the AI does all of it for you so that you don't have to do anything. And that means we're able to get better results that no one else can think of.
Yeah, I think that's you touched on several points. Now, when you were talking about tailgating in, I don't want to get back to that, but just to clarify for the listeners, you were actually doing physical penetration testing. So you would wind up physically in a space, take pictures that you were there, and show them their vulnerabilities. The same psychological principles, though, apply no matter how you're breaking into a system, right? It's
Yes.
Finding the bad habits. It's exploiting people's trust, and this normalcy bias that people have to, well, this is the way stuff is, and so you do have to find ways to shake that up. And you're right. I think one of the things that I liked about your approach is that it is when we implemented fish testing here in 2015, we were early, but it was very important to us that it be, I didn't like the word gamified, but that was the approach. It had to be non-threatening. It had to be something that the staff and everybody was excited about doing and participating in the process. And I think you're right. There was a lot of early bad implementations of fish testing, right? I mean, we heard, well, we do it once a quarter, and it's this standard, and we check that box and we're done. And there's no customization around behaviors, those things. So really, your system And any good system that anybody be looking for should really be adaptive, right? It should be something that the users respond back to, and the system then gives them a different set of training. Is that something that advocates?
Yeah, absolutely. Not only does it adapt to the individual and on the training, but also the phishing simulations. In addition to that, we have role-based training baked in. So it's not just your generic security awareness training that everyone in the company gets. That's sort of this one size fits all. This is adaptive. So your IT team gets training about common mistakes they make that lead to a compromise. Your developers get training on what's called OWASP Top 10, but it's just secure development practices. We have training for the C-suite on cyber risk management and just understanding basic cybersecurity topics in general. We've got training for your defenders on what's called the MITRE attack framework. And this is just basically an inventory of all of the different tactics that we've seen the bad guys use and how they're exploited. And it's important that defenders know that so that they can look for them within the network. And we've got training for your finance teams, your marketing departments, your sales teams, and so much more. And so all of this is because different people have different vulnerabilities that they present to the organization. And it's very important that people understand how their job and their role could impact cybersecurity. And I think a great example of this is HR. They tend to be very susceptible to phishing attacks, not on purpose. No, it's never or rarely on purpose. But nevertheless, they're very susceptible, yet they have access to all of our most sensitive information. When you start telling HR these things and connecting the dots in a very simple way, it clicks and they're like, oh, wow, I do have access to this. I do have to be more careful. And it may seem like a, duh type of thing. But you'd be amazed at how just connecting the dots and creating that human connection can help change people's behavior and getting them to start thinking in a different way. I don't mean to pick on HR. I actually like HR. They're one of our biggest allies.
Yeah, no, it's the guys in sales you have to watch for. But your point is very good. The people, I always say that, everybody aspires to be part of something bigger. Everybody wants to be on a winning team. And you're right, that sense of ownership when you do take the time, and even in a small organization, which is where I think this gets overlooked a lot, is it seems like, well, we got to implement this program. It's going to be such a huge undertaking. But it really just starts with talking to the employees and getting them ownership that they're going to help the company survive a cyber attack. That, as we say, on the IT side, we have a lot of, I won't say derogatory things to say about users, but we have a lot of little, idioms and things we use to describe user behavior. But we're all human, right? And so everybody has to understand that, hey, I'm here, and the fact that I'm the person sitting in this chair makes me the target. It's not because it's me or because I'm going to do something stupid. And I hate it when a user feels bad about having done something that was really beyond their control, because the guys that are doing this are spending a lot of time. If there was an R&D department somewhere in Eastern Europe or Asia or wherever where they're doing all the psychological profiling, they're spending a lot of time figuring out what we're going to click on. And so you've got to get that ownership, right?
Absolutely. And it's not just that. There's other elements at play here. It's security because is very prevalent in our workplaces nowadays. And what that means is that for a lay user that knows nothing about cybersecurity, really nothing about computers, enough to go to work and use Office to get their job done and whatever it happens to be. But past that, they don't know computers. And so the average person often believes that it's so secure at their work that they couldn't possibly get hacked. And there was this study that found that there's this group of people, I want to say it's like 6% out of 100, that will, or somewhere around 6% total, but 6 out of 100 that will forward a suspicious email from their personal account to their work account so that they can click on it at work because it's too shady to click on their personal computer, but their work computer is so secure it couldn't get hacked. So it's not too shady to click over here. That is, it's one of those things that just simply educating users about the fact that there is no such thing as too secure to be hacked makes a big difference and eliminates that group of people from your workforce.
Yeah, and I think to that point, the cloud platforms, G Suite and Office 365, I think also give that false sense of security. And a lot of businesses clearly for years have fallen prey to that. Well, we go to Microsoft's cloud, then we'll be fine. And they don't realize we got to go to Microsoft's cloud, and you've got to implement all the security that's off by default. MFA being one of the big ones. I mean, it took Microsoft years to enforce MFA to any degree where they really, push it now. But for years, you were able to run without that. But the training side doesn't go away with that. I mean, you've got to train people no matter where your email is coming from. You've still got to have that training, because if you click the malicious email while you're checking your email at home or even on your mobile device, you could still get that malware. And then if you're then using that device, as we all were from COVID, to then come back into the organization, you can bring it. You can bring the malware with you that way after getting infected at home.
Absolutely, it's all interconnected, and to that regard, that's the reason it has to become a subconscious reaction. I always talk about what I like to call human virus definitions. But all it means is that when we run a phishing simulation and we provide that just-in-time education to help them understand, where the red flags were, and we do it in a healthy way so that they don't feel abused, but they feel empowered, what happens is it creates what I like to call a human virus definition. So that user now becomes 70% less likely to fall for any similar attacks in the wild. And they begin after just a short period of time and getting, just a handful of these simulations under their belt, moving on without even realizing it. So sort of an autopilot, if you will. And so you'll go back to the user and you'll say, well, you deleted that. Why didn't you report it? And I say, oh, I didn't even see it. I don't know. I guess I just clicked delete. I don't have any recollection of that whatsoever, but it sits in their deleted inbox. And that's because this, when we're doing this right, it's happening at a subconscious level even more than it's ever happening at a conscious level.
Yeah, and that's getting the users there again was, like I said, we started in 2015, so we've been at this now 8 years. And we'll talk a little bit about why we changed products, but what we did see was it didn't take long. I mean, we got our click rates down, and if you're doing phish testing, it's all about that, it shouldn't be all about that, but that's really the metric that you follow, the trailing indicator to say, hey, yeah, it's working. But what we did see was just this higher and higher suspicion of things, even things that, the types of, things we get sent to our help desk now, because we set up a phishing mailbox, was is this attachment safe to open, which is a legitimate question, but they're doing that on the tail end of a thread with somebody where they're expecting the attachment. It's coming through Proofpoint security. It is, by all stretches of the imagination, a good email to click. And so I talk to my team sometimes, go, well, have we driven it too far? And the answer is no, because everything will change, and all of a sudden that Proofpoint will look a little different or something, be a little weird about it. So that's really where we found it too with the users. Like you said, this virus definition concept, they get that normalcy bias I referred to earlier. They get used to seeing the things that are right and the things that are wrong. And so when there's something just a little off now, they catch it, which is just amazing that you can get a workforce there.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And that's part of the reason that we make sure to start training your users right out of the gate about about those little details, because you don't want to get people so scared that they won't click on anything. So now it has to be this happy middle ground, this balancing act, if you will. All of security it's balancing business operations with security. And so we start training people to look for that external sender notification banner right out of the gate, to look at the email address that's sending it, to look at the context of the email, to look at how they greet you. those little details that like you said, are the things that it's the tiny little things that are off. That's going to make the difference between catching it and not catching it on those ones that have already gotten through 10 layers of security to get to their inbox in the first place.
Was the other thing that you see when you hit a user base, and again, I want to stress for anybody listening, we're talking about 5 employees or 500. You're right, you have to find that sweet spot in there as far as what is safe to open and not, and pairing this with a smart filtering process on the back end, because the things that we saw coming through that our users started catching were the things that our malware protection was not able to catch, like business email compromise. When the attackers would inject themselves in the middle of a thread through somebody else's breached mailbox, and all of a sudden we're getting requests to move money. And if we hadn't had that training, they wouldn't have spotted the odd things that were happening, like this email address changing and whatnot. So we've had years and years of really good success, but then you look at, we're hiring people, because during COVID, man, we've had more people, more turnover in the last 2 years than the firm probably had in the previous 5. And how do you get those people ramped up to that same level? Because I'm fine with the people that started in 2014 with me, right? But I'm scared to death of the guy that started this month. So that, again, is an interesting approach you guys take in the way you scaled through that. And that was a truly unique thing. You want to describe that or talk about that for a minute?
Okay, so our new workforce, we've got the big workforce trained, they're conditioned, they do a good job. What do we do about the new workforce? So what we do is it's adaptive. That's the reason that we brought an AI to this, because it one size fits all just doesn't work, and it's not efficient. So we want to be able to increase the frequency of the amount of phishing simulations that we're running against each individual, and not just increase the frequency, but find out what you are most likely to click on and then begin targeting you with that type of attack until you're no longer susceptible. And so we do that rapid triage just by simply, the more you click on, the more of that type of phishing simulation you're going to get. And so it helps to train you on that type of attack in a very quick and safe environment.
So, so just to recap this for anybody, for our listeners, it doesn't matter the size of your organization. It doesn't matter if you're cloud-based or not, as far as phishing. And I think the other thing is, the things that people learn from this, hopefully they're taking home and they're teaching their family to be safer about things. I mean, we can get into a whole another conversation about the email phishing that goes on with individuals, and specifically the elderly, which is just insidious, but they're the largest victims of this by far. The other thing, though, is the fatigue factor. Again, it has to be fun. I've told the story before that, and for a reason I won't get into, I finally bet our staff of, if they could ever have a month with 0 clicks, we'd have a pizza party, and that was the thing. So that was the incentive. It took us 5 years to get there, but we finally bought pizza for the firm. It was a fun thing, but it was always that kind of positive reinforcement. You guys never, shame, put up the, you just clicked, here's the ugly email, and here's the 3 days of adaptive training you're going to have to be subjected to, right? I mean, that's not the way to do this. It's got to be positive. But where I was headed with the fatigue factor is, and at some point it may happen with your product, it may not. So far it's been adaptive, but your users do get used to how they're being tested, and I think that's something to look at. If you're using a system now and you're happy with it, great, and if you got the results you want, great. But how much of that is the users going, oh yeah, that's I'm not going to name names, but okay, that's our monthly fish test from X, Y, and Z company. You can ignore that. How much of that goes on?
Well, hopefully not much. We make them very realistic.
Well, I didn't mean with you specifically. I just meant in the industry. I think that's a problem because
a lot.
Yeah, I mean, some of the other products I've seen, I guess I should have been more specific, just seem to collect a pool of current event emails, and then they push them to you on a schedule. And it's the users do get used to that. They're going to recognize those patterns, right? So you want to highly randomize it. And I'm sorry.
I'll go for it. No, I agree. It absolutely needs to be heavily randomized and adaptive, because otherwise they will get that fatigue. You can't just keep running the same simulations over and over and over again. We battle that by really everything's in buckets. So we just make sure that we're constantly adding to our buckets and keeping them full, so that our AI has plenty of content to work with you. The other thing we do to battle that, though, is advanced spear phishing. So our clients can set up a few things like giving us a logo, giving us email signatures, giving us even the names of people within their organization we can phish as. And so it can really take the spear phishing up a notch when your HR phish comes from a legitimate looking domain and a legitimate person inside the company with a legitimate signature. So, while we make it very non-punitive, very friendly, and we even gamify it, especially for the ones that would cause somebody to be upset if they weren't. So we tell people we're going to phish ahead of time. And then when we're sending a sensitive phishing simulation, our AI Laura reaches out ahead of time and says, hey, this is the specific type of attack. Now be on the lookout for it. I'm going to phish you. And it will come either 6 minutes or 6 weeks later. And so they will now be on the lookout, and it creates a sort of hypervigilance. But regardless of any of that, you definitely want to avoid that, that same sort of cyclical, overly used content, because it's people need variety. And that variety is what helps to keep them engaged. An example of that is that, there's this thing called space learning theory. And it says that, people digest content better in bite-sized chunks of information. But there's these sub things aside, or I guess sub laws with it. One of them is that if you say the same thing in 3 different ways, you're going to get higher retention. And so we have especially for the really critical things like USB thumb drive being dropped, or phishing, phish email clicks. We take those topics, and that's exactly how our content works. You may see very similar content multiple times, but it changes and it's said slightly different, and it takes a slightly different approach, and there's a little bit different story in there, all to keep it fresh, keep it relevant, and also help your each person hear it from multiple perspectives, and hopefully gain a better insight on it.
Yeah. And I think to get back to what a business owner does with this, I mean, again, if I'm running a small 10-person service organization with Outlook, Office 365, and I know I need this, I'm going to look for a product that's pretty zero config, and so if you're selecting, I'm speaking to our audience now, if you're selecting one of these products, you look for something that's going to be an easy ramp up, easy setup. But then the trailing indicators, what is your measure of success? And as I mentioned earlier, it's usually click rates. And so you want to see, the industry standard, anytime I get into any of these, is 30% click rates the first time you run one of these, or even higher. We look to see, we were happy when we got down to 1 or 2 or 3%. But you're looking through this adaptive approach to get down into the sub ones, right, into point. And then so again, for the business owner, you're looking for something that's got a good dashboard on it that you can look and see, and then also see maybe who your problem users are, and at some point you do have to take that into consideration. If you got somebody, I always pick on the salesman, but if you got somebody that just will not stop clicking on the bad email, at some point Laura's got to step aside, and HR's got to come in and impose some kind of harder training, or maybe even sanctions before that person gets you in trouble. We're kind of up against a break point here, so I'm going to just take a quick pause and thank everybody for joining this first segment. We're going to break this into 2 because it's running an hour. And then we're going to come back and talk. I want to get deep into the current threats and the things that are going on, I think, to focus on that. So I've been speaking with Joshua Crumbaugh, CEO of PhishFirewall, www.phishfirewall.com. And we're going to come back in just a moment and talk about current threats. So that'll be in the next episode. But I want to thank you for your time today, and thank you for listening to Cyber Matters with your host, Russ Dorsey. That's me, and part of the KSOOF Podcast Network. And we'll be back soon.